You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Welcome to the California State University Dominguez Hills Presidential Distinguished Lecture Series. I'm Philip Holt, Dean of the College of Natural and Behavioral Sciences, and I'll be your MC this afternoon. The title of today's lecture, Fighting for a Sustainable Future and Healthy Communities, really echoes the mission of Cal State Dominguez Hills. We believe in partnering with our communities and ensuring through education, research, and service, a brighter future for our students and their families. You know, our campus is located in one of the most desirable regions of the United States, right? Beautiful beaches, bright sunny days like today. But you and I know that LA County isn't Hollywood perfection. We have some of the state's most polluted areas, most commonly due to industrial activity, both past and present. And sadly, much of this pollution disproportionately affects the region's lowest income neighborhoods, places that are home largely to individuals of color. It's for these reasons that today's featured speaker, California Attorney General Xavier Becerra, and our distinguished panel of experts have joined with us this afternoon to discuss the issue of environmental justice. Because everyone deserves to live in a community that is safe and healthy. Before we get started though, a quick note about the format of this event. Following the Attorney General's remarks, CSUADH President Dr. Thomas A. Parham, who I believe most of you know will be inaugurated tomorrow as Cal State Dominguez Hills' 11th president, we'll sit down with Mr. Becerra for a question and answer session and discuss some of the most pressing issues related to environmental justice. That session will be followed by a discussion with a panel of experts who will share their own ideas and views of how we should be fighting for a sustainable future and for healthy communities. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce our president, Dr. Thomas A. Parham. Today's distinguished lecture is a result of Dr. Parham's vision for this campus, and it's an example of how his leadership is promoting intellectual conversations that matter to the campus, to our communities, and beyond. Please welcome Dr. Parham.
Thank you, sir. Do you intend on reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I'm a veteran. My father was a veteran. My sons were veterans. Are we going to recite the Pledge of Allegiance? Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
We'd be glad to cite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, sir.
In fact, let me, first of all, in thanking you for your service, invite you up with me. Come. Come. Come stand with me.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask everybody to please stand.
There's no flag in here, but it's okay.
Place your hand over your heart, please. If you would lead us.
Place your hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sometimes improvisation is the best way, yes? Welcome to this day's presidential lecture series at California State University, Dominguez Hills. This campus is one of 23 in the California State University system, the largest system of public higher education in all of America. As a system, we educate some 490,000 students each year. This Dominguez Hills campus was founded in 1960 and has now grown to being a regional comprehensive university with some 16,000 students. We are not a little place anymore. Tremendous diversity and a broad range of academic and co-curricular opportunities for all of our students. This campus really is a crown jewel, not simply for its academics, its co-curricular learning, but really for the diversity of our student body. So on behalf of our faculty, staff, administration, and students, I'm excited to welcome you to this exciting event. It was Brother Malcolm who was clear that education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Indeed, we desire to be the destination campus where student passports can be stamped with the ink of intellectual enlightenment, can be outfitted with the visas of co-curricular learning, can be processed with the photo images of possibility and potential for their pending life's journey. This is the second in our 2018-19 series that were initiated with the intent of shedding light on a broad range of issues central to our time and to this nation. At Cal State University, Dominguez Hills, we seek not just to inform, but to disrupt you from those comfortable categories of intellectual, emotional, and behavioral apathy in our fight for sustainable futures and healthy communities. As a social scientist, I'm acutely aware of the successful models that relegate the etiology of people's problems and their distress to mostly individual factors connected to the people themselves. There are, ladies and gentlemen, other models out there that point out that the etiology of people's problems is not always personal, but rather is social, cultural, and environmental. And thus it is important to take a broader look at environmental scan at factors that both improve as well as contaminate the experience and life space of people in our community. Our lecture this afternoon should do just that. And I can think of no one better than our Attorney General, Xavier Becerra, who has been a warrior, has been a champion, and who will be introduced in a moment to lead today's discussion. I want to commend his long and distinguished track record, both in the House of Representatives and state government most recently. Tremendous service to our country, but really his support for an advancement of justice. His efforts were not simply born out of a title that he carries, whether on the Hill or in Sacramento. His efforts really result from his lived experiences where his own family roots taught him to persevere through life's challenges. And so, beyond being Attorney General and all the accolades, he is a wonderful example for our students, 60% of which are Latinx. They should use him as both an inspiration and a role model, as should all of our students on this campus, irrespective of their demographic. When choosing a path toward their career and personal aspirations, he is an individual who we want to be able to emulate. Again, I welcome all of you to today's presidential lecture series as part of this inauguration activity this week, and I hope that the discussion on California's efforts to defend environmental protections that are so critical to our health and well-being will be impactful to all of you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, President Parham. I'm now honored to introduce our guest speaker. Xavier Becerra was sworn in as the 33rd Attorney General of the state of California in January 2017. Since taking office, Attorney General Becerra has dedicated himself to protecting the environment, making it a top priority, and he's filed multiple lawsuits to uphold the rule of law when it comes to protecting the state and the planet. In 2018, Attorney General Becerra established the Bureau of Environmental Justice at the California Department of Justice, which focuses on protecting people and communities that endure a disproportionate share of environmental pollution and public health hazards. A native Californian, Attorney General Becerra was born in Sacramento. He was the first in his family to graduate from college, receiving his bachelor's degree in economics from Stanford University and his Juris Doctorate from Stanford Law School. Prior to becoming Attorney General, Mr. Becerra served in the California Assembly and then 12 terms in Congress as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. During his tenure in Congress, Mr. Becerra served as chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. And you're likely aware that Mr. Becerra was selected to deliver the Democratic response in Spanish to Tuesday night's State of the Union address. Regarding that selection, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi praised the Attorney General as a towering champion of equal justice, while Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Mr. Becerra embodies the promise of America and that his moral and vigilant leadership on behalf of hardworking families is a critical marker for all who believe that our country's best days are still ahead of us. Please join me in welcoming today's featured speaker, the Honorable Xavier Becerra.
Dean, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Dean LaPolte, thank you very much for the introduction and the kind words. Next time I'll bring my parents so they can hear that. They're always, actually, I really should bring my daughters. They're the ones that need to hear it more than my parents. To President Parham, I want to just say to you, thank you for the vision of doing these series of lectures and opportunities for the students at Dominguez Hills to come together with people who are jumping out of the box and hoping to make a difference, because that will be their future. And the sooner they start rubbing elbows with folks who are trying to do that, the higher they'll be able to jump and the farther they'll be able to take us outside of the confines of that box that more often than not, we never got to go into or could never get out of. And so I think it's important that you have established this series. And may I wish you luck in your very important address tomorrow. Somehow I think I'm going to probably applaud more for yours than I did just a couple of days ago. But either way. I flew in this morning from Sacramento, and I must tell you, having landed and coming in from LAX as you're driving, what a beautiful sight to see the snow-capped mountains. How long has it been since we've seen that much white on those mountains, right? So I just said to you two very important things. The two operative words in that sentence are snow-capped and sea. Because you see, nature is going to work its will on us whether we like it or not. And the more we work with nature, not against her, the better off we're all going to be. That beautiful sight is something that is natural to this area. But it hasn't been happening as often as it should be because of our interference in what nature has been wanting to do. The consequences are grave for us by trying to mess with Mother Nature. The other part that was our operative part of what I said was the word see. How many days is it that you can't see those mountains? And how obvious does it become what we're doing to nature to make it tough for nature to give us everything it always has? See, those mountains, they provide us with 2/3 of the water we count on here in the state of California. And everything the scientists are telling us is that over the course of the next 70 to 80 years, if we do nothing to change the path of this globe's industrialization and constant use of carbon, we're going to lose 2/3 of the snow in those mountains, which provide us with 2/3 of the water we need. If anyone thinks California is going to shrink over these next several decades in population size, you're not talking to folks who just yearn to have an opportunity to come here. And if we can't count on the water source that we rely on, how do we do this? And so it is time for us to work with Mother Nature, not against her. And so at the Department of Justice, it's not in my job description. It's certainly not written in the California Constitution, which gives me the authority and the powers to represent and defend you, our values, and our resources. But I will tell you, the last enemy I want is Mother Nature. And so I intend to work with her and let her know that the Department of Justice in California is with her. And so it should surprise no one that we have done a number of things in the state of California to protect our people and our resources, but I'm hoping she's watching because I'm trying to protect Mother Nature as well. And so when half of my 45 lawsuits have been filed to protect the environment and your health, it's not just for you, it's for good old Mother Nature as well, because I want her to continue to send some water into those great mountains so we can see those white caps, which will ultimately let your children drink real water that's clean and that will let you enjoy life into the future. And so that's what it's all about. But see, along with trying to respond to Mother Nature, I think we have to recognize something. Man, and it used to be really man, now it's humans, men and women, more and more. But we used to get it wrong quite a bit. And it wasn't always men and women now, but mostly men in those days, in government who got it right. And so I hope I don't leave you an impression that it's those of us who have the opportunity to work within our governments, which is crucial, but that alone will solve these problems. We obviously need our private sector, and we need our consumers, and we need those who are civically minded to join with us. Because it was Cesar Chavez who reminded us that when it finally dawned on us some 50, 60 years ago that DDT, a chemical that we were using universally, mostly on our crops, to kill pests, was also killing us. But it wasn't our government, whether the EPA or any California environmental agency, that banned the use of DDT first. EPA did in 1972, but it was the United Farm Workers in 1967 who reached a contract with a grower to ban DDT on the fields of that grower so that the farm workers who were picking the crops that you and I were eating could work without killing themselves by having been involved in the use of DDT on those crops. And so I hope we recognize that this effort requires all of us to join in. And to those of you who are right now preparing yourselves to be those future leaders, I know you're involved in a number of activities. Mother Nature would love you to be involved in this one as well. We need to stand up because at the end of the day, whether it's President Parham or me or any of the other folks here who have gotten their education, we're getting ready to assign you Mother Earth. And I think you want to have as robust and productive a Mother Earth as you can have. And so help us. Stand up with us. Do what Cesar Chavez did back then for a bunch of farm workers who probably had far less education than those of you in this room have, and fought and did what the government took a lot longer to achieve. Fight for your rights and fight for the rights of Mother Nature. And so my challenge and my expressions to you here are simply those that I've learned over time growing up. It is pretty easy to understand what you got to do when you come from a place where you don't have much. You got to make sure that a few others keep what they've got. When you find out how much there really is, you got to make sure you can spread it out so everybody can share. And when you do that, prosperity arrives. And so for a kid who thought he was middle class growing up, until the day he was driving to Stanford University with his mother, just 2 hours away, because I was born and raised in Sacramento. Actually, I didn't even know where Stanford was until the day I was actually driving there with my mom, even though I had applied and gotten accepted. I thought I was middle class all those years of my life. I had really good food, and I think I see my sister-in-law, Marianne Reyes here, who will know that my mom is like her mom, just fabulous cooks. And so I always ate well. I never had a pair of Converse sneakers or Levi's jeans, but I always had what I needed. And until that day that I was driving to Stanford and finally started driving through Palo Alto, California, did I realize I'm not middle class. And so I knew there was a way to go and to bring others with me. And so our job is to remember that there are a whole bunch of folks who are already doing environmental work, who are some of the greatest environmental champions, and you don't even know about them. It's because we don't think of them as environmental champions. See, they do it because they have no choice. Economically, they can't afford to buy a whole bunch of plastic-wrapped goods and just because it's too expensive. They got to buy the old-fashioned stuff that's less expensive. They can't leave the lights on inside the house everywhere because mom and dad can't pay the high bill. So you better shut off those lights before you leave that room. Somehow, people understand what it means to conserve because financially, they don't have much choice. And they become some of the best environmentalists we've ever had. Just they never get credit for it. In fact, not only do they not get credit for it, the way they get paid is by having all the environmentally degrading activities occur in their neighborhood. One of the first tasks I had when I got to Congress was to fight the establishment of a waste incineration plant not far from where I lived in my congressional district by the city of Commerce, very close to the city of LA, because there was a low-income neighborhood. So go ahead and place it there. Go ahead and let all the waste be incinerated right there in those neighborhoods. Not too long ago, about 10 years ago when I was still a member of Congress, we had a fight for the closure of a car battery recycling plant that was located not far from where that waste recycling plant was supposed to go up in East LA. And when we finally shut it down, we discovered that it had contaminated neighborhoods throughout the area with lead. And if you know what lead does to kids, it ruins futures. Talk to the folks in Flint, Michigan, and they'll tell you what it means to have the fright of not being able to drink water out of their faucet because of the lead contamination. And so all of these folks who forever have been the best environmentalists are the ones who are paying the price when we degrade the environment most, because they're the ones that have the least resources to fight some of these degrading environmental projects that some will say we need, and I won't deny we have to dispose of our waste, and some of it we do incinerate. But why is it that they all seem to land on the east side of LA or the south side of LA? And so that's what we have to fight. And that's why we established the Environmental Justice Bureau in the California Department of Justice. We have gone from places in the Inland Empire, Jurupa Valley, where they were trying to locate these massive developments of these huge warehouses that are now essentially taking over communities because Amazon and all these other companies are now doing all this shipment the purchases are done over the internet, and everybody's buying things over the internet, not going to the stores. So now they need these huge warehouses from where they can ship these goods that people are ordering online. All of those warehouses are being established not in the nice parts of town, but in the lower cost communities where these companies can afford to buy large tracts of land. And guess what comes with those warehouses? Thousands upon thousands of semi-trucks back and forth every day. And guess who gets to breathe the air that those semis spew out? The folks in those communities that live there. So whether it was in Inland Empire, we're in an action right now in Fresno. We took action to help Oakland fight off the establishment of a docking place for coal that was being shipped out from the central part of the country to be shipped out to other countries abroad and would be stationed there in Oakland, where the coal in those train cars would be exposed. And when it's windy, The dust from the coal flies all over the place. Guess who lived around that port site? Most of the low-income communities. And we went all the way up to Lake Tahoe, where we took an action because City of South Lake Tahoe was deciding that with all that visitor traffic coming in, they had to move Highway 50 to get it out of the commercial zone because it was becoming a really a vibrant commercial zone. They want people and tourists to really take advantage and not have to be split up by a freeway. It makes a lot of sense. Except what they decided to do was reroute the freeway through a low-income community without regard for what it would do to split up that entire community. So we stepped in there as well. I hope some of you are taking interest because this is what we're doing. This is what you should be doing. And that's why we're hoping that you're finishing your degree real fast because we need you. We need you. And I have a feeling some of you want to get in this fight with me. And so I will tell you that I learned from my parents, you always respect those who are your senior and who have done things to command your respect. So I took that lesson very well. But as the years went on, it occurred to me very quickly that while I will always provide you that respect, at the end of the day, you have to earn it to keep it. And so right now, I will tell you this. We need to earn the respect of Mother Nature. And Washington, D.C. needs to earn the respect of California. I'm not going to wait for them to do the right thing. We're going to do what we need to do to protect California and the people that are here. And so let us all work together because at the end of the day, what really counts is whether or not when you're driving and you're looking at those mountains, are they filled with white and can you see them? And if you can, then you are in harmony with Mother Nature and we are doing right by the world. If not, then you better enlist with me because we got a fight to take on and we're going to make something happen in this place. Get ready, learn how to jump high, jump out of that box because we're going to change this world by making sure Mother Nature respects us as much as we will respect her. Thank you very much for letting me be here with you. Are we sitting?
Yes. So thank you so much for that. At this point, President Parham will now join the Attorney General for a little question and answer on some of the most pressing issues in this area.
Thank you, Dean LaPope. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Javier Becerra. So, Mr. Attorney General, one of the things we've gotten a sense of is your passion. Tell us a little bit about how you became so passionate about environmental justice.
To me, it was, as I said, a pretty natural thing. I learned that I couldn't waste, and if I did, you know, my three sisters always ended up with a little bit more than I did. And so you learn real quickly what you can and cannot do. You have to be frugal with what you have. And so for me, it was natural for me to constantly tell my daughters, could you turn off the light as you're walking out the room? And it's only natural for me now as the Attorney General for 40 million people to tell the administration, can you let us turn off our lights so we can save energy in California and stop telling us you want us to use coal instead of solar or wind to produce that energy? Let us do it the way we want. We actually are willing to pay a little bit more money to do it this way, but let us. It's what's made us not just the economic engine for the country, the developer more jobs than any other state, number one in manufacturing, just the way we're number one in clean energy, number one in agriculture, just we're number one in high tech, number one in entertainment, number one in hospitality, number one in graduates from college in the nation, And now we shoved Great Britain aside, and now we're number 5 in the world as one state in terms of economy. So for me, it's wanting to make sure that I take what I learned and just applying it now as the Attorney General and watching my state decide it really just wants to jump out of the box. And at the end of the day, guess what? Everyone else in the country is going to jump out of the box too. Some take 20 years to do it, but they're going to jump just the way we did.
Absolutely. The theme I've established for not only my inauguration, but for really my administration here at the campus is taken from stories I've heard of students whose lives this campus has transformed. Those lives now go out and transform America. So we transform lives at Dominguez Hills that ultimately transform America. How does what you do help transform the lives of Californians?
I said to Governor Jerry Brown when he first offered me the chance to be Attorney General, that if he was serious, then I wanted him to know that if he wanted to just continue moving forward, that he would not have to look back because I would have his back. And California being a forward-leaning state, it's important for us to continue that progress. So from the way I look at it, we do transformative things that many people think are not possible. Not possible, not because we don't have the science or the human power to do it. It's because it costs too much or it would take too much effort. And we've done these things. I mean, we have done things that most people say, yeah, but no. And I think probably, President Parham, the thing I'll tell you most that I think is important, and I hate to use this as an example, but I think it really proves something. State of Virginia is going through a really difficult time right now because its 3 leaders are right now in an awful predicament because of things they did in their past. I'm going to tell you how I can relate what's going on in Virginia with the governor, lieutenant governor, and the attorney general with California. Everyone knows that in our past, we've got some history that isn't always the best. Because we try not to flare that up, it stays hidden. But when it comes out, all of a sudden, boom, it hits you, and people aren't sure how to deal with it. Does the governor need to resign? How can the governor apologize? Why didn't he let us know what he had done? And I think you all know what I'm talking about in terms of his being involved in a photograph, blackface, Ku Klux Klan photograph, what his role might have been or wasn't. The difficulty with that is that at some point people have to know there's a price to pay for what you've done. And you can't expect to be a leader and have moral authority to push unless truly you've earned it. For the longest time that was kept low. It's coming out. Mother Nature is hoping things come out soon, because if we keep things low about how we're heating up the climate, how we're changing conditions, how these wildfires are no longer during the wildfire season, they're now year-round wildfires, how we're losing the water that we need. If we just sort of keep it tamped down, when it comes out, it may be too late. And so we should be willing to have these conversations. And people who haven't always been honest, it's their time to come to Jesus. And so I think it's better for folks to do their confessions and then let the people decide where we end up, whether it's on something as difficult as being racially insensitive or something as sensitive as harming Mother Nature.
Let the church say amen. I'm wondering, what are some of the more pressing concerns that residents in underserved communities face with regard to creating healthy communities and a sustainable future for their families, particularly when they live in places that are surrounded by food deserts and oil refineries and toxins and other pollutants?
Yeah. information. They rarely get information. They're always the last to learn that they live in polluted places, contaminated places, that their children have been breathing or eating or drinking something that's bad for them. Choices. Even if they find out, they don't have enough money to leave. Where do they go? They can't afford to go somewhere else. And then capacity. Can't leave, probably can't fight. Where do you fight? In court? I don't have the money. Talk to my member of Congress, well, or my legislator. I've never met them. They don't come visit. And so it's a sense that you're, as I said, you're either never getting to go inside the box where all the fun is, or you're always locked in the box where they want to keep you because all the fun's on the outside. We're always the ones trying to look to where everything is. And so I think for modest income folks who always work hard and try to zero in on just providing for their kids, I think what we have to do is recognize that we can help by doing very little. All those actions I mentioned that we're taking, whether it's in South Lake Tahoe or Fresno, we haven't sued. We've just gone to these cities and said, you know that under state laws and your ordinances, you're supposed to go through a process where you inform people of a project, you go through the environmental process of determining whether it's going to be impactful on these communities, and then based on that, you can decide if you could do this development. Because so many of these communities, their leaders are moving forward with these projects, so it's not just a developer's fault, it's the leaders in these communities, the folks got voted in, who are signing off on these projects in ways that violate their citizens' rights. And so it's just empowering them. And just by stepping in and saying, by the way, the Attorney General and my 1,200 attorneys are ready to help these folks in these communities. That's it.
That's our Attorney General right there. Right? So talk to us about the Bureau of Environmental Justice and how is that bureau unique in its mission compared to, say, other states or national environmental protection agencies and programs?
I have a core of attorneys and investigators whose job it is to go the next mile. So we know there's environmental degradation. They go the next mile to ask, so who are the communities that are being impacted by this degradation, who don't have the resources, the wherewithal to fight now, because they don't want to just save the earth before the year 2100, because they got families that are living with the lead battery plant contamination now. They've got families that are having to deal with the release of methane gas now. And so this team is focused on the now and helping these communities. And it's easier than you think, because the reality is we're not trying to litigate against the powerful interest every time. We're just trying to make sure local governments understand their responsibility to their citizens to go through the process the right way for everyone, including the people who would be impacted by the projects they're looking to establish. And by the way, a lot of these folks, Mr. President, are going to say, hey, wait a minute, don't kill the project, because it means jobs. And our folks need jobs. And so I'm not trying to kill projects. I'm just trying to make sure if the project's going to be established, that one, it's done the right way, taking into account the health of the people there, the environment. And by the way, if you say it's about jobs and you want these folks to be supported because it's about jobs and they're going to have more contamination and pollution, then tell me what you're doing to make sure some of these folks get to have those jobs.
Real important. The duality of your role as Attorney General, as I think about this, has you being both an advocate for the public as well as an ambassador for public policy. So what obstacles do civic leaders face in trying to implement environmental protection and sustainability laws and policies that help Californians? And what pushback do you get as Attorney General to that?
I just mentioned jobs. All these developments will create jobs. And most of these low-income communities are saying that's exactly what we're looking for, is jobs. And so please, as much as we want to be able to breathe the air and drink the water, we got to feed our kids. And so the tension that occurs when you try to protect their environmental health interests against their interest to have more opportunities for better paying jobs. That's a very obvious one. Another one occurs because, well, take housing. That's a perfect example. We need more housing. We got so much homeless going on. We have too much, there's not enough affordable housing. And this crisis is getting to the point where even if you're working, you can't afford a place for yourself and your family that's decent. Well, we got a lot of rules that sort of limit how much we can grow and in what ways. I think most people would say we need to know how we're growing, because it can't just be sporadic growth and sprawl. There's a tension. How do you resolve it? We need better housing, more housing, but at the same time, we want to make sure we don't tax the earth and our resources more than necessary. Those are the tensions that policymakers and governmental leaders have to tackle, because you have to know how to find that sweet spot.
Are there ever times, staying with that theme about both you being an ambassador as well as a advocate for the people, do you ever find those roles coming into conflict for yourself internally?
So, quite a bit. Let's give a quick example. I mentioned the battery plant on the east side of town that contaminated residential communities, schools, business establishments. When I was a member of Congress, it impacted a lot of the folks in my community. So I was fighting, and I was going after the Department of Toxic Substance Control in the state of California for not doing enough to shut these guys down. And we were constantly at them for not doing their job. That was as a member of Congress. Today, I'm the Attorney General. Guess who's the attorney for the Department of Toxic Substance Control? Me. So I can't tell you much more than what I just said, because I'm now the attorney for DTSC, the agency that's supposed to do that job. And so it's, I'll run into those kind of circumstances where my role puts me in a lot of different places. At the end of the day, though, my job is to make sure that I'm protecting folks' best interests and their opportunities. And so I'll navigate that dilemma, because it should not stop me from doing what's right.
Well, that makes absolute sense. We've got just a minute or two left. But where are my students in the house? All right? Look at all those bright young minds.
Amen.
All right? Because we're talking about sustainable futures and environmental justice. What advice would you give to students and parents living in communities such as South Los Angeles and the South Bay, trying to set good examples for their children about living healthier lives and developing more sustainable futures? What advice would you give them?
Okay, so I'm going to give you the advice that responds directly, but I'm going to give you the real advice after that. So the advice that responds to the question is, do a little bit of extra research. You're schooled now. You know how to do that. You know how to do it better than some of your friends who didn't go to college. So just learn up a little bit more, because you probably already know it. I suspect many of you students know it, especially if you're the first in your family to go to college, or you're one of a very few in your neighborhood to go to college. People look up to you. They may not say it right to your face, but they look up to you. You're pretty cool, because you survived that first year. You're now in your fourth year. You're going to be a professional. It's big. I know I felt that way. I remember my parents used to always love when I would bring my friends from Stanford to come visit. And I used to wonder why, because that's as close as they ever got to rubbing elbows with a professional. My dad got to the 6th grade. My mom didn't come to this country till she was 18, when she came from Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. And so for them, it was a big deal to be in the room with a college student that wasn't their child. And so just do what you're doing, because people are already impressed with you. But now let me give them the advice I'd really like to give them.
The real deal.
The real deal. Please go travel. Take advantage that you are in college. Go travel. But may I suggest to you, travel to a place where you cannot speak the language. Because if you want to know who you really are, go to a place where they're going to tell you who you are, where you have to listen very closely, where you have to do everything to explain yourself, to try to make yourself understood. Don't go where everyone speaks English, because that's all you'll do is speak English. Go to a place where you have to work hard to show them who you are. And guess what? You will learn more about yourself than you will any other way. And the other piece of advice, if you are smiling, you're doing something right. And so if you're in a job and you're not smiling, that's not your job. Don't stay there. If you are smiling in a job, it's like what those friends who are already looking at you as role models. If someone sees you smiling at the job, because there's a whole bunch of folks who are at work and they're not smiling a lot because they're not feeling so good. But if they see you smiling, they're going to come to you and say, what's the secret sauce? What is it about what you're doing? And they will want to learn more about you. And you are on your way to becoming a great leader for this country if you are smiling and people are recognizing that you smile for a reason and they want to be with you. And so travel, know yourself by going to places where you don't speak the language, and make sure when you get a job, you are smiling. Yeah.
I want to say two things as we prepare to close. And I shared with the Attorney General how flattered I was as president in putting this inauguration series together with the help of a fabulous team, that having someone like him who was such a champion for sustainable futures and environmental justice was so important. But I want to take a point of privilege and just highlight something for him. You heard a little bit about his credential from Dean LaPolt. And even those of us who have followed him in the Assembly and in Congress and now as the Attorney General know, he shared with you also a piece of his roots and the educational background of his parents. And you know now that he is Stanford educated, not just at BA, but in law school as well. So how does a person who comes from that kind of environment, with loving family, whatever, with parents who didn't get the degrees that he does, rise to do what he does? An important point I try to point out to our students is that circumstances are places people come from, not who they are at the core of their being, right? When I say he is a warrior and a champion, it is because he has worked hard, he has learned how to persevere, and he has taken his God-given talents to be able to do right by the world, by the state, and by the people who he cares so deeply for. I'm also reminded, that sounds like an applause line for our Attorney General. Lastly, I hope what you take with you today from our conversation, even as we get ready for our panel, the Honorable Marcus Garvey reminds us, he said, chance never satisfies the hope of a suffering people. It's only through hard work, persistence, and self-reliance by which the oppressed ever realize the light of their own freedom. If we want sustainable futures, and if we want environmental justice, and can't necessarily look to Washington or other places to do it, then doggone it, we've got to take it in our own hands. And he, as the Attorney General and as a congressman in California, has taken it upon himself with his colleagues to be able to fight for the people, not because it was politically smart or whatever, because it was the right thing to do, right? It's about self-reliance. Please make sure you take that message with you today. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the Attorney General of the state of California, Javier Becerra. Give it up!
Thank you.
Thank you, President Parham and Attorney General Becerra. Please, let's all give them one more round of applause. From this opening discussion, it's clear that the issue of environmental justice is complex. There are wide-ranging ramifications that are critical to our communities and to the role of our university as a steward of place. To help us navigate through it all, we're fortunate this afternoon to have a distinguished panel of experts from a variety of backgrounds, all bringing their own expertise and perspectives to this issue. At this time, I'd like to invite the moderator and panelists to the stage for introductions. And our first panelist is the first executive director of the California Environmental Justice Alliance. She has extensive experience working as an attorney on behalf of immigrant communities and on environmental justice matters, such as the contamination from the Exide smelter plant in Vernon, which you heard a little bit about today. Please join me in welcoming the executive director of the California Environmental Justice Alliance, Gladys Limon. Our next panelist has worked diligently to improve the quality of life in the community of Watts through his involvement in community service, job training, youth and seniors services, housing initiatives, and a variety of other programs. Please welcome the president and CEO of the Watts Labor Community Action Committee, Tim Watkins. Our third panelist is a CSUDH graduate student studying sociology. They are currently serving as the Campus CalFresh Outreach Coordinator, and by the way, they are a recipient of the CSU Trustees Award for Outstanding Achievement. Please welcome Hawk McFadden. And our moderator for today's discussion is a faculty member here at CSUDH, whose research focuses on community and landscape ecology and the impacts of humans on the environment. Please welcome Professor and Chair of the Department of Biology, Dr. John Tomlinson. And John, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dean Leopold. So, first of all, thanks to our panel for being here today. Historically, the term environmental brings to mind thoughts of trees and lakes and parks. But today, when we talk about environmental justice, we're talking about a lot more than that. So, Gladys, I'd like to start with you, if I may. You have over 15 years of experience in legal, policy, and community-based work for environmental justice and civil rights. As Executive Director of the California Environmental Justice Alliance, what does the term environmental justice mean to you, and how did you decide as a lawyer to move into this area?
Great, thank you very much. So environmental justice takes a much broader, more holistic view of the environment beyond just conservation and preservation of natural places to encompass the whole environment where human communities live. Right, so it's where we work, where we play, where we live, and where we pray. That is the environment. It's, again, looking at the circumstances and the surroundings of where humans live. Now, the environmental justice movement is an intersectional movement. It seeks to achieve justice through racial justice, economic justice.
Primary schools were fourth in the nation, fourth best. Now they're 46 worse because of people like you.
And that is
You were saying.
Seeing the First Amendment at play, which I support as a civil rights attorney. We are a tolerant nation. So, and what motivated me to become an attorney was growing up in a community that was, unfortunately had disproportionate environmental burdens from other communities in my region. And and that's Oxnard, which is situated right between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. So I observed racial injustice, lack of educational opportunities. Oxnard hosts several gas-powered plants on our beaches. So I'm very lucky to grow up near a beach, but it was an industrial beach, right? There's a Superfund toxic waste site. And while I pursued law school and my career to protect human rights, I initially started an immigrants' rights work, addressing the constitutional rights on a systematic level, doing impact litigation. But I always kept my close roots to Oxnard and was involved in several campaigns there, including one that ultimately defeated a proposal to build a liquefied natural gas facility 14 miles offshore from Oxnard that would have been the size of 3 football fields to have liquefied natural gas, which is a much greater quantity, essentially putting out a bomb out off of our coast. So as I learned more about fossil fuels and again the disproportionate impacts, it just felt like it was no longer a choice for me to work in environmental justice full time. Environmental justice is again about human rights. It's about breathing clean air, drinking clean water, having clean soil to grow food. It's about our basic rights that every person, regardless of where you can afford to live, should have in order to fulfill your full potential. So if you are impacted by environmental burdens such as Exide, where we had lead and arsenic raining over families' heads for decades with the knowledge of our state, then your rights to an education, to work, to even vote, exercise your rights, all of those are compromised. So our environment and those basic rights are fundamental. And unfortunately, even in California, where we pride ourselves with being a leader, a progressive leader, we have sacrifice zones. We are an oil state. We are not the leader we should be at this point while we've made a lot of progress.
A good point, thank you. Tim, the Watts Labor Community Action Committee has been working to improve the quality of life in Watts since 1965. As president and CEO, and in the context of the local community, what role does environmental justice play in protecting and lifting up the people of Watts?
Well, I think most folks would be familiar with the history of Watts. It was a sort of an unincorporated area of Los Angeles, outside the city of LA, and they called it a rootin' tootin' Western town because during Prohibition, it's where you could go and get alcohol, you could go there and gamble, you could go there and find mistresses of the evening, and there was very little prohibition for any of those things until oil began to make its way through the area, and the city of Los Angeles needed to annex Watts in order to get the oil down to the harbor. That process started a long, slow grind of compromise, a violation of human rights, a completely unrelenting compromise of moral authority on behalf of the elected officials and the people themselves to seek justice for environmental racism that has been rampant for the last 100 years in Watts. And so, when you ask that question, it reminds me that corporations, agencies, elected officials all have a responsibility to conform to some form of rule and some form of law. And in places like Watts, where there's very, very little enforcement, then environmental racism becomes the result. That's the byproduct of this lack of accountability and irresponsibility, such that today we're faced with probably one of the nation's worst conflagrations of environmental consequences here in Watts.
Yeah. So Hawk, you have been honored by the CSU trustees, as Dean LaPolt said, for your deep conviction for food justice in South Los Angeles. You were instrumental in opening the urban farm here at Dominguez Hills last spring, and you currently serve as the CalFresh coordinator on campus. What ties do you see between food justice and the way some people more commonly think about environmental justice? And what's behind your dedication to this cause?
Thank you. The original, pardon me, the allergies are acting up, so. The original concept behind the farm was the Kathleen Cleaver farm, because she was the communications director for the Black Panther Party for a number of years, and she's got a quote that says, "Freedom looks differently for everybody." Paraphrasing, if you don't have enough food, freedom looks like having enough food. And so as we found out that across the CSU system, over 42% of our students are food insecure, there's a lot of research that points to growing your own food as the fastest and easiest and most effective way to get food to those students. So it's not only reclaiming the land and getting students high impact practices and the satisfaction of growing their own food, but it's actually meeting a basic need that is not being met by the current system that we're in. So that's just a cog in the sustainable food system, though. So there's the farm, but then they have to get the farm somewhere. So now we have the Food Recovery Network, which takes food from the farm and also from dining and serves it to students in housing who need it. There's also, I sign up students and sometimes faculty and staff for CalFresh, formerly known as food stamps. But now the next step in that is getting them a place to spend those food stamps on campus. So we're working with dining, and we're working with a recent farmers market that's coming to our campus every Tuesday to accept CalFresh there. So it's a sustainable food system is what we're working on. So, but I came to this work thinking that I was going to be serving underserved communities that are in food deserts, right? And as I'm going deeper and deeper into this topic, I'm realizing that these are actively disinvested communities that are experiencing food apartheid as a result of environmental racism. And so it's up to the people with the power and the resources to, they make choices about where to put grocery stores and where to put battery recycling plants and where to put parks and factory farms. And they consistently place them, as we've already heard, in communities of color, low-income communities of color. So if their systems aren't serving us, then we have to create our own systems that may subvert those. And what the Attorney General brought up, that ethical concerns, the basic needs is an environmental justice issue because there's an ethical concern to it. You as a human deserve food. You need food to live, so how is it a commodity? How is it that we have to pay for it? I started my life as a chef, and my own inability to eat at the places I worked, I would have to leave from putting pate and caviar on a plate and go get 99-cent cheeseburger, and that was my life. And that's not a one-off. That's the industry standard. So from my personal experience and from living in South LA and going to school here, that's what drives that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tim, in regard to food, WLCAC brought about the South Los Angeles First Farm, I believe the Mudtown Farms, an urban agricultural initiative. Tell us about that and how it's helping the Watts community.
Well, it's being constructed right now, but we intend for it to help the community by informing people that have been for so long uninformed about the dangers of a poisonous environment, first of all and foremost, but secondly, about how proper menuing, proper shopping, proper preparation of food will lead to healthier bodies, healthier minds, healthier environment. And in fact, we hope, we hope most that in partnership with university here, Cal State Dominguez Hills, as well as Charles Drew University, which is right in our backyard, that we can start to research the food alternatives to synthetic medications, that we start looking at how to prescribe food that reduces diabetes, hypertension, the wrong kind of cholesterol, and so on and so forth. And so we're looking forward to that place being at the southwest corner of the largest public housing development in the country. That we hope that that location will help bring a semi-informed community into a place where they can seek respite, where they can sit and listen to birds or walk the walking trails, pick blueberries off of the vine, or whatever it is that helps them find and sustain a modicum of peace. It's what we need most in our community. A lot of folks have the wrong impression of Watts, that it's an ugly, dangerous, dirty little place where nothing very good ever happens. But the truth is, it's a place that's been made the way you perceive it to be. The people are an entirely different type of people. They have hope, they have resilience, they expect for there to be a better way of life, but far too often they're dying 12 years sooner than their neighbors in communities just across town, because the environment that they live in has been so poisoned that they don't even know oftentimes that they're living with 500-600 times the amount of lead that the federal government considers to be safe. And just so anybody that doesn't know what that amount is, it's zero. Mm-hmm. Zero. The County of Los Angeles, City of Los Angeles, LAUSD will tell you that 15 parts per billion is safe. And when our kids can't get past the 3rd grade reading level, we blame their parents, or we blame them that they're not trying hard enough. But the truth is, lead is a barrier to learning. And when you've ingested just a little bit of it, just a little bit, it stays with you. The half-life of lead in a kid, and you all really, I hope you let this one piece sink in. The half-life of lead in a child is 25 years. And it's cumulative. So once you get it, once you start getting exposed to it, and there's nothing done to remove it, mediate it, that kid is pretty much stuck. So it's no wonder he drops out at the 9th grade. Forget the chef's job. Let me go work at McDonald's. Mm-hmm. I can help mom with that. But the truth is that at the 9th grade, he's still reading at a 3rd grade level. So prison industry scouts come out to our community routinely to see how many kids are reading at the 3rd grade level in the 4th grade, because they can figure out how many beds they need to build to house those students. I'm not kidding. This is real. Right now, I'm looking at every school. Every elementary, middle, and high school in Watts has unacceptable levels of lead coming out of the drinking fountains. Wow. So it's no wonder that, President Parham will face his challenge trying to get kids out of the catchment area that this university naturally should beckon to, because the kids aren't ready to come in at a normal reading level, or a normal retention level, or a normal level of being able to sit still and accept what's being taught and told to them, and they're being told that it's their fault.
Yeah. So, all of you are very, very obviously invested in the fight for a sustainable future and a better future and healthy communities. We heard from the Attorney General how state policies and laws play a key role in protecting communities. Others would say the policies and laws aren't doing enough and more needs to be done. So my next question first for Gladys. Public policy and legislative reform are some of the key tools that your organization uses. I think that's correct. How effective has it been in taking this approach? How can it be more effective, and what else is needed?
Yeah, thank you. So what you're hearing about here, what all of us are talking about, are systemic issues, right? These are entrenched institutional issues. So we need the solutions to be at a systemic level as well. So it's absolutely important that we are in the Capitol, that we're in DC, that we're shaping our laws and creating new laws to address these systemic issues. So California, again, has been an environmental leader in many respects. We've made a lot of headway, particularly when it comes to what we call the supply side of energy, of how we're creating renewable energy, how we're creating the infrastructure and the jobs. For example, last year we had a huge victory in getting former Senator De Leon's bill SB 100 passed that puts us on a pathway, the state on a pathway to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2045. That's fantastic. We also have an unprecedented policy, solar on multifamily affordable housing, that invests $1 billion over 10 years to ensure that there is solar rooftop in low-income communities and in apartment buildings and multifamily housing, so that we're getting our communities up into the new technology. They have the benefits on their energy bills, and we're creating jobs. So it's just an example of the headway that we've made. However, there's still so much to do. We still have oil drilling, again, that's rampant in neighborhoods, sandwiched between homes in Los Angeles. We have the largest refineries and growing, expanding refineries while we speak on the western half of the U.S. Not very long ago, we're the third largest oil producer. We're fourth or fifth right now. But those operations are in disproportionately low income and communities of color. What does that mean? That means that kids are growing up next to benzene emissions, carcinogens, particulate matter, explosive, very deadly tanker trucks that have chemical cocktails going through their neighborhoods. In Torrance in 2015, there was an explosion at a refinery that happened very close to a a tank holding hydrofluoric acid. If it had hit or been a little bit closer, it would have been a catastrophe, a deadly catastrophe. So it's just by an act of God that it didn't hit that tank. And so our communities are being poisoned, and they're sacrifice zones. The life expectancy, is compromised. So there's a lot of work to do. And we also, again, we've talked about Exide. Even just exposure to air pollution. Exposure to air pollution is not equally distributed. African Americans and Latinos are exposed to 40% more vehicle pollution than white Californians. And households earning less than 20% per year are exposed to 25% more particulate matter air pollution than those earning more than $200,000. So this is the way environmental racism plays out. And our communities are constantly pitted against each other and given the false choice between family-sustaining jobs and living in healthy, safe communities. So we need to bring all communities forward into a clean energy future. We need our administration. We have a new opportunity with Governor Newsom to really enact and move forward the bold policies that are commensurate with the crisis that we face collectively, but that our particular communities have been in crisis for so long. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, yet we're not acting like it. When we extended cap and trade last year, a bill that was written by the oil industry, we set the bar too low for California. We're following in the context of the Trump administration. We need to be the real leader. And as part of the compromise in that bill, the air districts were preempted from putting emission caps on refineries and largest sources of emitters, after our communities had long fought for rules to place caps on those on emissions. So there's a lot more to do. How we can be more effective. Again, we've done too little on really addressing needing to get off of oil and clearing our communities from those health and safety hazards. We need our regulatory agencies to partner with our communities, not to continue to partner just simply with industry. When we talk about environmental harms, we're really talking largely about industrial harms, right? About economic harms from industry. Our laws are largely influenced by the industry, as I mentioned with cap and trade as an example. What we also need in policy making is language that provides enforcement. So in California, for example, the right to water has been declared a human right in California. However, there are no rights or remedies that come along with it. So it's declarative. It's simply symbolic. It's meaningless. We also need elected officials to stop taking money from the oil and gas industry. Again, this is what is... It's not only what is killing our ecosystem, again, not killing Mother Nature, because at this point, by not aligning with her, we're acting as parasites, and she will shake us off and will thrive without us. But we need, that is what is, we're essentially committing collective suicide by continuing to burn carbons. So we need, oil and gas money at this point should be like blood diamond money, like arms industry money. It should not be something that continues to influence in any respect what our elected officials are doing to protect our communities. And well, I know we have a time limit, so I will stop there. I can't keep going.
So Tim, as a community organizer, is public policy the answer? Or what else do communities need to be doing? Is it a matter of awareness, taking action, more resources, all of the above? How do we accomplish that?
Well, unfortunately, after being at my father's side when he founded the Watts Labor Community Action Committee 54 years ago, and now since he passed away, I've been the president for the past going into the 19th year. I've learned that poor public policy is the promulgator, perpetuator, and the cause of a lot of the symptoms that we see and characterize as poverty. We keep looking at poverty as though poverty is a problem. 9 out of 10 times there's a poor public policy behind that causes this so-called symptom of suffering and anguish. I am at an impasse. I've come to a conclusion in our community that we're so hopelessly poisoned by now. Our railroad right-of-ways are completely contaminated with illegally dumped hazardous soils. We routinely sweep the people off the right-of-ways that are seeking some place to find shelter, but we leave the poisonous soils there in mounds. That I've done a series. They're on WLCAC's Facebook page. You can see that we spend a lot of money removing the people, and we simply ignore the illegally dumped soil, oftentimes dumped by the truckloads in the middle of the street. It's the same thing for, you talk about oil as a problem. We can stop driving cars today, and the effect of leaking pipelines in Watts that have been leaking since sometime in the late 20s will continue to be the problem, because they've contaminated not only the primary aquifers, but the secondary and the tertiary aquifers deep in the ground. So now we've got a plume of poisoned water moving southwest across underneath Watts and towards Gardena. Oh, and by the way, don't let me forget about Ujima Village, that was also poisoned by an ExxonMobil operation that is still emitting hexane, methane, benzene in untold quantities. We were told that it was confined to the Magic Johnson Park space where Ujima Village used to be, where they tore it down in order to start extracting the toxic vapors. Well, that was in 2008. They're still doing it. Now they're finding that, oops, it moved over to a nearby high school called Centennial High, and because it's public, it required a public disclosure, and now they're cleaning it up. But there are tens of thousands of homes between that original site and that high school that's we claim is not clean. I mean, that it's clean, that it's safe to live in. Who's claiming that? ExxonMobil. Why is ExxonMobil claiming it? Because they were asked by the County of Los Angeles and the regulators, EPA or whoever, to do a test and check and see. It's like asking a policeman that shot a kid in the back that was running away, why he did it and whether it was the right thing to do. the perpetrators in our community are asked to explain what why they did it and why it's okay. And unfortunately in Watts, and I'll close with this, Watts is a hopelessly geopolitically gerrymandered state. That it's just a little place, 2.5 miles square, attached by a mere shoestring of real estate that goes all the way down into the San Pedro Harbor area, 15 miles away. 40,000 people in Watts, more than 200,000 people in San Pedro. You can do the math. We will never enjoy being able to elect a representative that truly represents the community of Watts. And with big oil being down in San Pedro, you can try to figure out who's going to be the squeakiest so-called wheel.
Yeah. So Hawk,
Bring it on.
you've done a lot as a student on this campus to raise awareness and bring action and resources to the issue. What can students be doing to make a difference?
Well, if you're a student in the room, thank you for sticking around. Students are in a unique position within academia. We're not jaded, right? We haven't been working in these industries forever. We're fresh, we're passionate. Sometimes we don't know what the established protocol or what the rules are, and so we just kind of do stuff until people tell us not to. Go with that, go with that. They'll tell you not to, just go with it.
Yep.
But when they tell you don't do that, listen to them, because what they're doing is they're giving you the tools and the language. They're giving you, they're teaching you research, teaching you analysis, teaching you all this stuff. And what they're doing is they're arming you with the ability to confront these systems and to subvert these systems. And so what you have to do, first of all, resistance as a student can also look like protesting, and I'm all about that. Do it. It serves a purpose. And if you are also uniquely positioned to be a researcher or an agitator in another way, do that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, learn your policy, learn your procedures, learn the language, learn about graduation rates and the effect of whatever on graduation rates. Like, learn what is important to your audience or who you're trying to influence, and do the research and cite your sources. So on that note, if you're looking for research questions, there's a whole slew of ways in which environmental justice moves beyond real estate and the earth and air pollution. It touches every single aspect of what is taught in this school. So you can ask questions and tactfully do the research and find answers to these questions, such as, what would justice look like in a land that honors indigenous cultures, not just in words, but by adopting indigenous practices that honor the land? How do we talk about justice when the multinational corporations responsible for global warming and for polluting our neighborhoods and elementary schools are also the major donors to our school? What is justice in a school where people who are exploring ways to grow and sell marijuana on a college campus, where many students have family members still serving time for a joint? How is fair housing an environmental issue? We've mentioned homelessness several times. And speaking of homelessness, what is the role of environmental justice in addressing the overrepresentation of LGBTQIA people of color who are homeless? What is the connection between reproductive justice and environmental justice in a country where Black women and birthing people's maternal mortality rate is 3 times as high as for white women, or white people? How do we reconcile the concept of environmental justice with the concept of borders? How do reparations factor into the conversation about environmental justice? Reparations for the descendants of Africans and Indigenous and Mexican and Chinese people and countless other ethnicities that have been the subject of that. So adding this industry jargon into our ability to code switch is going to work to our favor, right? So we can go into those spaces where we can begin to dismantle capitalism and all the cis, heteronormative, white supremacist, ableist patriarchy that supports it. Thank you, Patricia Hill Collins. Thank you.
a related question to you. Keeping in mind that self-determination is an important principle in this effort, what can this campus be doing to help our neighboring communities be healthy and safe?
Well, we need interns to help do research. And, you know, we probably should be mounting some kind of redistricting campaign so that our community can join its closer neighbor that shares so much more in common than to be, you know, the distant bastard stepchild, as I say it sometimes, to a distant community that really doesn't know much about us at all. The conflicts that the Attorney General talked about are so numerous. You know, people that I've worked with that were working with me to correct Department of Toxic Substances controls, internal racist communication about our community, ended up leaving me to go work for DTSC. It's sometimes the contradictions in our struggle are too difficult to figure out. Students have the innate ability to stand for a long time, physically stand a long time in a line or in, you know, in front of a building or what have you. And I'll stand there a long time, but it's not as easy for me as it used to be. I thrive on youthful exuberance. I love fresh ideas. I love the idea of young people coming to me with something that I don't understand and think I know what I'm talking about. and I've learned that, you know, there's so much more to be gained from surrounding myself with as many ideas, minds, thoughts, ages, you know, places of origin, that I'm so much richer for it. And I'll tell you something, people that were formerly incarcerated join that group as well. They have rich, useful experiences, and if we can look past, you know, the constantly criminalizing consequence of them having been incarcerated in the first place, to see how they join the battle, they're suffering the same, you know, exposures as the rest of us. So people that want to get involved have to simply say they want to be involved, and then we'll figure out how. It doesn't always mean that we've got a script or, you know, a job description for a volunteer. We just need to attack the problem, you know, with the ferocity that we would if it was our child, you know, in front of a insane dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think we've heard some good calls to action for students out there. Gladys, are you working with universities who are providing policy expertise or data? Is that something you're looking at, looking for? And what can we be doing to help, in your view?
Thank you. So yes, absolutely. Good policy and creative policy solutions must be informed by data, right? The data and the science, and more information we have, the better the solutions can be reflected and also justified. As to the latter, as to the justification, many times our communities know the problem because they're living it, right? They understand just from experiencing harm in their community that there is a correlation between the harm in the source and the impact that it's having on their families. However, unfortunately, the way that things work is that rather than have a precautionary principle and put the burden on an environmental source, on an industry or a practice or an agency, and say you can't do this unless you prove it safe, we have the reverse practice where we say, you know, if you can't prove that it's harmful, then it's okay, right? It's a very bad practice and policy that continues to perpetuate and exacerbate the crisis that our communities live. So we need the data, we need the science and the technical assistance. You know, one of the challenges for communities when it comes to industrial harms, environmental harms and burdens is that it's so technical, It's really difficult to understand, to really understand how the way a refinery works or a plant works, what different chemicals are. So we rely on experts. Even as an attorney, I can't make a case for something unless I understand the technical part of it. So we need scientists and researchers who care about these issues, who care and understand the communities, who are going to, dig into those difficult questions, who are going to do it for the sake of gathering knowledge and advancing good policy. As we know, the industry has largely shaped the research, particularly as to fossil fuel industry. We know that there's been a huge cover-up and a campaign of manipulation and deception by the oil industry. They knew decades ago that their practices were creating, increasing greenhouse gas emissions and creating climate change. And yet, they hid it. And so we now are working with a number of policy and science and technical experts who are working for the sake of knowledge through academic institutions that are really carrying forward exciting research that's obviously objective, based on good practices, that are providing real tools for advocates and communities to understand the issues and advance good policy. Including, for example, just as an example is what we need additional research in. There was a study that was done by Manuel Pastor of USC, Jim Sad of Occidental College, Rachel Morello-Frosch of UC Berkeley on the impacts of our cap and trade policy. Well, advocates warned that the design of our cap and trade policy would actually lead to increased emissions and increased co-pollutants from the largest sources in California. We were shot down and we're told, no, air pollution and health impacts is different from climate change and GHG emissions, even though that's legal fiction that's now been embedded in policy. And so we're going to treat those separately. And so that was disregarded in the design of the cap and trade policy. And these researchers, their results have indicated that, in fact, greenhouse gas emissions from the largest sources, from cement plants and refineries, have increased. And with that, the pollutants have increased. So our cap and trade policy has exacerbated the impacts to our communities that are most impacted. There's a lot of research that needs to be done, even with housing, which has been mentioned. There's a huge housing crisis, and so there are developers, again, the industry and economic interests that are advancing this notion that we should have a streamlined process of doing environmental review under a California Environmental Quality Act, that we should streamline it because it takes too long. But we need good housing and safe housing, right? We don't just build housing near freeways, especially low-income housing. That's going to exacerbate, again, the problems facing those that are most vulnerable. I think we wouldn't so readily, or people wouldn't readily support the idea of not doing environmental review when it comes to building schools. We want to make sure that our kids are safe. Well, the same principle applies to housing, right? So there are a host of issues that require research. So for students who are out there, if you have any interest in becoming a researcher, working within academia, science, tech, I highly support you, and please continue to follow that pathway and put your God-given talents and the privileges given to you through your education and otherwise, for the public good through various forms of service.
Yeah. Thank you.
So to the audience, you've heard the questions for our panelists, and we want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask them some questions also. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and someone will come to you with a microphone, and let us know if the question is for a specific panelist or just in general.
Hello, everyone. My name is Belén Mercado, and I want to ask a question directly to California State University graduate student, the coordinator. I was presented with a lot of thought-provoking ideas today, and you guys are all raising consciousness on environmental issues, racism within our communities, gentrification. You guys are raising consciousness on homelessness. But one of the things that I was thinking about when I was sitting here. It's like all of these topics are socially inclusive, socially developed within our communities. The majority of people here on campus know about, like these, I guess, important issues. But one of the things that I would like to collaborate with you, now that I know that you work on campus for students, one of the things that I want to collaborate in, I guess I'm a self-called mental health advocate, so I know a majority of people who are on the streets, who I have the privilege to work on Skid Row, they have a mental disability. So how can we incorporate the topic of mental health and homelessness to create a plan? Because many people are afraid. Many people have this stigma of coming up and saying, you know what, I have a mental disability, and because I have a mental disability, it is difficult for me to find a job. It is difficult for me to have, like that basic freedom right of getting food or having a meal. So how can we collaborate? How can we work together in order to include this topic as well within the California State University Dominguez Hills community? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
How would that happen? That is, I'm a social scientist, so not necessarily mental health is not my, I'm a sociologist, that would be more of the psych department, but I think that there's so many layers to that. What Tim brought up earlier about the effects of lead on not just learning, but on personality. Like who is getting, there's another research question, who is getting misdiagnosed with personality disorders when it's actually a contamination disorder? And who is making that distinction? Who defined those? Who does it benefit? If it's not a contamination and it's a personality disorder, then somebody's off the hook. So that's just one aspect. But I don't know. I would really have to sit with a lot of that, especially here at this campus. But I know that that's a very interesting topic. I encourage you to go to Student Research Day next week and find somebody that's doing it and develop that, because that's really important. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Lee Walker, and I basically want to congratulate you on being president. I'm an alumni here after 47 years, so this is the first time I came back. So it's wonderful to be in the environment to see that we're actually maintaining the things that I thought about 47 years ago when I was out there walking the campus here at Cal State Dominguez Hills. I just want to say that just in 30 seconds, basically, nothing very long, but this is the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do to provoke thinking, to keep the awareness up front, and especially this young man here for the Watts Labor Commission. Back in the day, we was talking the same thing, like what you're talking about how Watts was and how basically how things were stacked against you. But by coming here to Dominguez Hills, I'm retired now, make a long story short, and I'll sit down. But after coming here for Cal State Dominguez Hills, if it didn't do anything else, it would allow you to develop thinking. And thinking, for me, opened the door to corporate America, opened the door for government, which I'm retired right now. And so, but coming here, doing research, being aware, doing what's necessary, staying up front, and not being scared, not being fearful, and taking that first step along the way is the key to success. From this point, as my generation passed the torch to your generation, so that you will continue to do what we try to do to make the world a better place, so that you can continue to see what the focus is for environmental affairs and politics and everything associated with that. I'm done.
All right. And I see that we're just about out of time, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. The inspiration to the students here, the passion of our panelists, the energy of this crowd, and the testimony of our alumni, I think, has made this a very, very special occasion. So I would like to turn it back now to Dr. Phil LaPolt for closing remarks.
Thank you, John. And please join me in thanking our panelists. Gladys Limon, Tim Watkins, Hawk McFadden, and our moderator, John Tomlinson. And of course, also to President Parham and the Attorney General Javier Becerra. Hopefully this event has left you informed, inspired, and at least a little bit outraged if you weren't already. I'm really reminded of the words of President Barack Obama, who said, "There's nothing so satisfying to the spirit, so defining of our character, than giving our all to a difficult task." And I think it's really clear that that's what the folks you've heard today have been doing. So thanks to all of them. So thank you for coming. Please drive safely, and we hope to see you again for the fall 2019 Presidential Distinguished Lecture Series.